Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which is part of the ongoing EU Code Week webinar series. Before we get started, we will take a moment to allow more participants to join us, so we appreciate your patience.
Good afternoon.
Okay, so I think we can start. I hope my audio is good enough. And once again, welcome. My name is Anna, and I'm a project assistant at All Digital, and I'm excited to be your host once again. But before we jump in, here are a few important points to keep in mind during the webinar. So this session is being recorded and will be available on the Code Week YouTube channel. If you don't want to appear in the recording, you are welcome to keep your camera off and your microphone muted. But of course, we encourage you to take part and share your thoughts as this webinar is designed to be interactive. The session will run about 45 minutes, and we will have a dedicated Q&A segment at the end of it. So feel free to write down any question, and as we go along with the session. To frame today's webinar with the broadened EU Code Week initiative, this series aims to provide a platform for exchanging practical insight, fostering mindful discussions, and of course highlight inspiring projects that drive innovation in education. And I'd like to introduce today's session with a question to reflect on together. So the question is, what if we didn't just wait for the future to happen, but actually create it ourselves? So in this session, we will explore how we can help students think ahead. So imagine possibilities and turn their ideas into reality. We will dive into future thinking and design thinking. And so to bring these two concepts to life, we will share how Brightlab is making these methodologies accessible for classrooms. So let's discover more. Join me today are Robaeyst and Ben Bruynooghe. I hope I pronounced good. I pronounce well your second name, guys. Els and Ben have extensive experience applying future thinking and design thinking in hands-on educational projects. So welcome, guys, Els and Ben.
Hi, Anna.
Hello.
Hi. I'm super curious to know more about these two topics. So I think I already talked a lot. Let's start. And Elson Ben, the floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you, Anna. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so thank you, Anna, for the introduction. I'm here on behalf of Brightlab. Our tagline is shaping future innovators. So you can imagine that we were very keen in working together on this EU Code Week with the current theme on Hello Future. So we put together a webinar on thinking in the future with the goal of activating students towards the innovation. I'm Els Bruynooghe. Actually, you got the family names correct, but you switched them between me and Ben. So I'm here in a role as a teacher. So I currently work at Brightlab, but before that, I was 7 years as a science teacher. And I want to take you with me in my role as science teacher, where I try to always spark curiosity, wonder, and in the end, maybe as well imagination. And there was an ongoing effort on how to do that in my classroom. Imagine you all are my students and I give you this activity, do an invention. Basically, it leaves a lot of space for imagination. It's a blank page. But as I did this in my classroom, this was a bit too broad. There was too much space. You cannot really start on something. But maybe if I do another exercise, it's the same, do an invention, but I can give a little bit of context. Maybe the context that I'm working in at this moment. We work in close collaboration with IMEC, which is a research center on chip technology, not the ones that you're eating, but the ones that you're in your mobile phone and in your laptop. And not only on how to create those chips, but how to use those chips. I can give you some examples on that we can put a chip in a small pill that you can swallow, and that pill can measure the acidity in your intestines and give a doctor a full overview of what's happening in your body. Maybe I can extend it with a camera, that you can also look inside your body and do all sorts of things with that. Or I can tell you there's also chips with a small needle on it. And that needle has a lot of sensors that can pick up the electrical signals from specific neurons in your brain. So you can measure all the signals in your brain. Or I can also tell you that there's a chip that extends our eyes, in the sense that our eyes are only sensitive to a small spectrum of the electromagnetic radiation, but there's a lot more of that electromagnetic radiation that we can use to detect tumors, for example. Now, when I did this to students, what happened? Of course, they focused on these examples. For example, someone told me they would like to have a machine at home that you can point at a patient and that cures the cancer, which is, of course, an interesting way of looking at, but I find this was maybe a bit too narrow. So by giving these specific examples, it might be too narrow. So I'm constantly on the way of looking for ways how can things not be too broad and not too narrow. I got lucky enough to be brought in contact with Ben, who is doing research on future thinking, a method where you can actually imagine multiple futures, and that got my attention immediately. Ben will work out the time frame after this, and after that, my task will be to bring it back to the classroom. We will have a small activity how you can do this in your classroom. Because to me, everything is about creating a context. And I got into this quote that I really like. It's saying, imagining the future is vital to progress. as it means technological advances are the result of deliberate efforts to make ideas reality, rather than simply humans reacting to their surroundings like animals. And to me, that's the key of what we're trying to do with our students. So I will give the floor to Ben, who will explain the framework around futures thinking and design thinking. And after that, we come back with a small exercise. It's up to you, Ben.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if you stop sharing now, I can share my screen. Then it should be ready. So I can immediately go into it. The slides again. Yes, okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me for this presentation. But before I give some theoretical insights in design thinking and futures thinking, I'd like to introduce myself because, of course, everybody can just say I'm an expert. But I'm also somebody who has some experience. So my name is Ben Robaeyst. I am a researcher for the research group of IMEC MICT Ghent University. So we are a research group that are actually floating a little bit between IMEC, so the semiconductor company, and Ghent University. And our research group is MICT. And MICT stands for Media, Innovation, and Contemporary Technologies. In my last few 7 years, actually, I have been active as a social innovation researcher. So I have been looking for social innovations for wicked problems, which I will come back onto in a minute, where we try to find technological solutions for problems that are present within the city, especially the city of Ghent. But I also started as a futures researcher a good 3 years ago. I started with developing some expertise in futures research or foresight, but I will also dig into that in a few moments. But we do apply it within IMEC now, within certain projects where we think about the futures of mobility, for example, or the futures of healthcare in Flanders. And if you need some contact information, then there is my email address over here. Good. Let's dig right into it. And to start the presentation, I actually bought some newspaper headliners with me. These are headliners from the context of Flanders, and we see in Flanders actually over the last years, maybe actually always, there have been some problems within Flanders or challenges that we want to tackle, and maybe that are also that can be applied to students as well. For example, here on the left top, I will translate to you Thomas. Thomas is a famous person in Belgium. He helped with cleaning up the Schelde. The Schelde is a river over here in Flanders. So there is a lot of trash in the Schelde, in the river. But then we also see an article which is about bullying. That is still quite a huge problem the last few years in Flanders. We see that there are a lot of traffic jams within Flanders. We see that there are a lot of people also homeless, especially within the city of Brussels. So what we actually see, or what these articles say, is that there are still quite a lot of challenges within our society today. And so these are just examples from Flanders or Belgium. But of course, these problems are also applicable within the context of Europe or maybe worldwide, especially Western society. These are all problems that we know, that are familiar with us. And these problems can also be appointed as wicked problems. Now, what are wicked problems? Wicked problems are actually complex problems that lack a clear definition. Some of you might have heard of it already, the term wicked problem. And this complexity exists because there is no definitive solution for these problems. So these are problems that are that actually involve multiple stakeholders. So if we look at a problem, multiple stakeholders, so students themselves, or migrants, or social workers, of random civilians, are involved within these problems. So it's really hard to pinpoint what exactly the problem is. Also because these problems are also interconnected with each other. And they also evolve over the time, which means that they are quite complex to comprehend, to actually pinpoint what exactly the problem is within these challenges. So they have multiple facets to them. But if we then also look, Els already mentioned it before, we also have quite a lot of new technologies within our society. So Els already mentioned the pill that can actually do a scan of your intestines and have live feedback on possible diseases or possible values within your intestines that are present. We see that there are IoT solutions, so Internet of Things solutions, where more and more products or more and more devices are connected. with each other. We see that also in the realm of education, that there are a lot of XR applications, which is extended reality, like augmented reality, virtual reality, that can help in the education process of students. So actually these solutions, these technologies, they actually hold in a lot of potential to solve problems, to solve these wicked problems. But at the same time, as we look here, you see this person in the top that is holding a smartphone. And actually the term is called phubbing, so which means that you are interacting on your smartphone when somebody is talking to you. So you actually neglect the person next to you. We also see the data center here on the bottom right, which has a really big impact on the climate. Today. So we see that these technologies, that they actually hold in a lot of opportunities, but they also hold in a lot of threats or possible challenges that come with these wicked problems. So if we actually add that up, these wicked problems even get more and more complex because of this technology. But there is also a lot of opportunities in there, of course. So then the question is, of course, okay, so we have these technologies and we have these wicked problems that are really complex. It's really hard to find a solution for it. How can we actually handle these wicked problems? And what I want to introduce today are three mindsets, actually two mindsets, because one is maybe for another webinar. But for me, in my experience as a researcher with the application of different projects, then there are three different mindsets that can help us in finding solutions for these wicked problems. So first of all, you have design thinking, which is a mindset in which we actually put the user or the human center to the process of problem solving. So we try to find solutions together with end users, together with civilians or other stakeholders. That's the first one. I will elaborately go into that in a minute. Then, of course, we have futures thinking, because, okay, if we involve the user, if we get a clear view on challenges that we have today, and we find solutions, how can we make sure that these solutions are actually future robust or future resilient? Where futures thinking is more anticipatory thinking, where you try to think in the long term, and you also think in futures, so in the plural. I will also explain why we call it the plural. And then you also have systems thinking, where you try to look holistically and interconnected for dynamic problem solving. So today I'm going to focus on the first two. But in my opinion, if you really want to teach students to handle these problems in order to give them the backpack, then you have to actually look at the three of them. But today we will focus on the first two. Okay, so let's start with design thinking. So actually today, and if I need to explain you what design thinking is, then actually it's quite hard to explain it to you, because design thinking, if you look online, these are just some sources that I looked up where I was looking for a definition of design thinking. And we see that there are different definitions for the same thing, actually, which is quite confusing because people also use it in different contexts. I will try to pinpoint it and try to have it clear for you guys. So first of all, if we look online, then we see that it's used as a process for problem solving, that actually that you look at the process, that you go through some phases in order to go to a solution. Then you also see that it's a collaborative endeavor, which means that you collaborate with different partners to find solutions, especially with the end user. And then it's also appointed as a non-linear or iterative process. So these are actually three things that are quite different next to each other. So what we can see here is that we actually can look at design thinking as a method, as a process, and as a mindset. First, if we look at it from the perspective of the method, and this is also the most common way that it is communicated, design thinking, that is actually a method where you go from a problem to a concrete solution. And that's the first way to look at it, which is also user-centered. So you, in this process, you involve the end user, you involve stakeholders that really experience the problem, experience challenges into this method. And to go a little bit deeper in this, we see that there are 5 different phases within the design thinking method. So first of all, there is the empathize phase, where you actually try to understand users. You want to understand their needs, their emotions, their challenges. So people who actually experience these wicked problems. For instance, students who get bullied, you start to You start to interview them, you start to empathize with them, what do they actually feel, but you also involve, for example, potential bulliers. You also ask them, like, why do you actually bully? In order to understand the full problem, you try to empathize with it. So this is the first phase within the process. The second phase within the method is the define phase, where you actually, so when you talk to people, when you empathize with them, you have a full area, a full spectrum of different problems that they experience. So what you try to do with the define phase is to formulate a concrete problem. So you try to define one concrete point where you want to find a solution on. In the next phase, you go to the ideation phase. So after the define phase, you have a clear view on what problem you want to fix. And then you actually ideate, you think about possible solutions. So you still think about what kind of technologies can we use. You look up on the market, what is already present. You think about possible solutions that don't exist yet. You try to ideate towards it. And then in the next phase, you look at the prototyping phase, where you actually prototype. You try to build a solution from scratch. You want to fake it. You want to fake a solution where you actually use or pinpoint one solution that you make tangible, that you create. And if you then have this solution, you can gather feedback. And so the same users that you have involved in your empathize phase, you can also ask them for potential feedback. And so what do you actually think of this solution? Do you think that this would work or not? So this is the first way to look at design thinking. And why do we actually do this? And it's actually because it's some kind of shortcut within the building new solutions, or it's also called the NPD process, so the new product development process, but this is more in management terms. So if we look at the process of generating new ideas, then in the classical format, you had an idea, you build it, you launch it, and then you learn. But the problem here is that building a solution, a real solution, for example, a new application or a new exoskeleton, for example, this costs a lot of money, and most of the time, this doesn't really fit the market yet. So it doesn't really fit the needs. Then you launch it, and then you only learn from it. So you actually spend a lot of money, a lot of time, and this design thinking process actually helps you in providing a shortcut for this process. Something that is important is actually that you have an underlying idea of the things that you do with the students. So you encourage the students, if you look at the different phases, that you start empathizing and you also start diverging. This is shown here in the double diamond model, in which we first, in the empathizing phase, like I said, we try to empathize. We want to look at different problems that end users actually experience. So you try to diverge. You try to open up your scope. You try to open up all of the different problems that you can detect with the end users. And then you actually define it. You go back. So the diamond closes again. And then you have one problem. And after that, you ideate again. So you go to a lot of solutions. And from all these solutions, you actually converge to, again, a prototype, to something that is tangible, that is testing, that you can test and implement in reality if it's already mature enough. Okay, so this was the first way to look at it, to look at the design thinking process, where you can actually look at it from the perspective of finding solutions. But what you also see is that design thinking is a really good manner to involve different perspectives. So also among students, if you think about solutions with students in the design thinking process, you can collaborate with each other. And all of these students have different kinds of talents. And this is also in reality, in bigger firms, for example, within IMEC, we make different profiles collaborate with each other during the conduction of this methodology. And it's the same story for the students. So they all have their own talents. They share it within this process. So the different perspectives can be represented, and you also try to empathize with the other person that you're working with. So therefore, the design thinking process is also a really good method to make students collaborate with each other. Another thing in the process is that it's an iterative process. So the idea behind iteration is that you go back and forward. Normally you go do it in a chronological manner. So you go from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3 to phase 4 and 5, etc. But the idea actually within design thinking is that you can perfectly go from your ideation phase back to your empathize phase, because along the way you learn, and when learning you might rethink certain points that you're already data points that you have gathered before. So this process also allows students to go back in their process, to think, to actually think critical about certain stuff. So this is what the process approaches. And then as a last one, as I mentioned in the beginning, for me, design thinking is especially a mindset, and it's a mindset that that is based upon experimenting, failing, and learning. So the first idea about design thinking, like I said, it's iterative, which means that students actually constantly are experimenting. And of course, the idea of an experiment is that you don't know what the end result will be. So if you fail, then you can actually learn from this. So that's really important in the design thinking mindset, that you try to learn as much as possible, and actually failing is sometimes even better than a solution that immediately works. So that's also a really important aspect from design thinking. So to wrap this up, this is a really basic form of design thinking, which can be applied in lots of different ways. But to wrap this up, then the most important elements of design thinking are, first, it's human-centered. So you try to work with the end user, the people who experience the problems themselves as much as you can. It is multidisciplinary. So you try to collaborate with different profiles, with people with different expertises, with different talents. You think about diverging and converging, which was the double diamond model. So you expand your ideas and you converge towards one idea. And then, of course, failing is really important here. So learning by doing. And in order to show you guys a example of how we actually apply this within the city of Ghent, we have the project Come On. Come On is a project that is a collaboration between the city of Ghent, between Ghent University, IMEC, and a lot of other partners, where we actually apply the design thinking process on the longer term. So this is mostly a project over a few months, where we try to tackle these wicked problems. For example, in the first version of Come On, or the first project of Come On, we were looking for solutions to make healthcare more understandable within the city of Ghent. And the example that I want to give you, guys, is the Common Maak Marathon, or the Makeathon, that we organized, which is a hackathon, especially for students from different educational courses here in the city of Ghent, where we challenged them. Okay, so we will provide the process to you guys. We will provide you some intelligence regarding design thinking. We will provide you with the method. And you guys have to come up with a concrete problem or a concrete solution to make healthcare more understandable within the city of Ghent. And for this, I have a little video. I hope this.
Ben, there is no sound actually.
There is no sound? Okay. I think I forgot to. 1 second, please. Oh. Yes.
Vandaag zijn we begonnen aan de maakmarathon, waarbij de studenten achter ons in een week tijd gaan nadenken over een oplossing voor de verstaanbaarheid van de zorg hier in het Gentse. Die oplossing gaan ze niet alleen maar bedenken, maar ze gaan die ook gaan ontwikkelen in een prototype, om dat dan te gaan testen, om op het einde van de week dan te gaan pitchen aan de jury.
We hebben studenten van geneeskundige richtingen tot designrichtingen, communicatiewetenschappers, etc. En kijk, die zijn samen aan het werken aan die oplossingen. Die zitten denk ik op een rollercoaster van emoties deze week, van yeah, we've got this, we kunnen het, naar oh my god, ik heb geen idee meer wat ik aan het doen ben.
Ik vind het eigenlijk wel spannend, want ja, je kent niemand en je weet ook niet wat er op je pad komt. Dus ik kijk er wel naar uit. Ik heb al mijn groepje leren kennen en we hebben ook wel al een een oplossing gezocht en bekeken van wat dat we juist gaan doen.
We gaan samen nadenken over verstaanbare zorg en hoe dat we dat kunnen toepassen vooral. We gaan ook vandaag een keer luisteren bij de zorg en bij verschillende partners die daar al onderzoek naar doen.
We zijn hier in het FabLab in Artevelde, waarbij dat we juist een kleine workshop hebben gekregen over hoe dat we moeten programmeren via Arduino, zodat we dat later kunnen gebruiken om dat te betrekken in ons project.
Mijn naam is Tom Raakleers. Ik ben verantwoordelijk voor Blue Health Innovation Center en ik heb hier deze week aan de studenten een aantal workshops gegeven. Eén rond hoe dat je een idee kan omzetten in een actieplan dat kan werken. En een tweede is hoe dat je dan dat plan uitlegt aan mensen, zodanig dat je op een verstaanbare manier uitlegt waar je mee bezig bent.
Ik ben Lien van IMEC en deze week hebben we de studenten de kans gegeven om hun idee, de haalbaarheid daarvan, biedt het effectieve meerwaarde, af te toetsen met verschillende experts. En ze hebben ook de kans gekregen om beneden in de biep met verschillende Gentenaars na te gaan of dat een idee een meerwaarde voor hen zou bieden.
En de eerste plaats, de groep die ook met een mooie cadeaubon naar huis gaat, is de groep van Dolox. Proficiat!
Ja, we zijn super blij dat we zijn gewonnen. We hadden dat niet gedacht.
We hebben een bakje gemaakt. Dat is een bakje dat vooral gericht is op de doelgroep ouderen. En wat doet dat bakje juist? Dat zorgt er eigenlijk voor dat een oudere in kaart kan brengen hoeveel pijn dat hij ervaart op een bepaald moment van de dag.
So as you can see, they have applied the full design thinking process, the different steps that I just explained to you guys, in a really concrete manner. And that's also something that we can do with the students when applying design thinking, with all of the extra benefits, of course, that I explained earlier. Okay, so we now we looked at design thinking. But of course, there is another mindset that I want to talk about today. So design thinking is really regarding the end user, is really regarding what kind of problems do we experience today. But then some people might say today, like, okay, so everything is changing so fast. So if you find solutions, then maybe the solution will be obsolete in the future, maybe even in the near future. And so the technological developments are so fast and the problems are changing and there are geopolitical shifts and everything is happening at the same time. So how can we actually prepare for this future? We actually want to look at solutions that are also sustainable towards the future, not only sustainable for the climate, but also sustainable just in endurance that they have. Are they actually future robust or future resistant? And there the question, of course, is, yeah, everything, it's nice to say that we have to take it into consideration. But then the question, of course, is like, okay, so in order to do that, we need to predict the future. So then the question is, can we actually predict the future? There are two question marks because it's a really big question. Like, can we predict it? Because a lot of people actually say we have different models that sometimes can predict certain behaviors of people or maybe some market behaviors. So we do sometimes have the idea that we actually can predict this future. But if we actually look at look at the future from a more broad perspective, especially on the topic of AI, then we can see that if people talk about AI, if different actors talk about AI, then we can see that there is like a really positive vibe among people who talk about the technology. For example, here putting AI in the driver's seat, where they talk about self-driving cars. And then also there is an article, as you can see here from Forbes, that AI can actually solve the climate change, that it can help in providing solutions for it. But then at the same time, you also see fundamental criticism on the development of AI. For example, AI and the rise of mediocrity, where people say, okay, so AI can't really be creative. Isn't this a threat for our society because it cannot be creative? Won't it take too many jobs? Other people talk about the AI bubble. A few weeks ago, we have seen it with some developments worldwide where some things were a little bit sketchy. We also see that from an ethical perspective that OpenAI dismantled the full responsible AI team. So the thing is that if we talk about technology, if we talk about the future of this technology, but also these wicked problems, we actually don't really know what will happen. So really predicting the future is something that is, according to futurists like me or future researchers, is impossible because it's too complex, the world. There are too many factors to take in consideration. And actually, that's not a it's actually quite logical, because if we look at the future in a single form, then we can say that the future doesn't exist. So because the future, if we talk about it right now, it doesn't exist yet, and if we are there, then it's the present. So actually, this future itself, it doesn't really exist. But the only thing that we have from the future is an image of this future. So we have some fantasies about the future. We have some expectations about the future. But the thing is that if you ask 10 different people what the image of the future is, then you will get approximately 10 different answers. So maybe some similarities there are, but there are also a lot of differences. So there we can say that actually the future, like the future image that everybody shares, actually it doesn't exist. So that actually is a problem, of course. Because normally in normal circumstances, we look at the future in this way. So we, okay, I will speed up a little bit. Thank you, Els. So we look at the future from the present in one line. And if we think about it in one line, then we also look at this future, these images. If we expect something to change in a certain way, then we also are going to behave in a certain way. And so we are going towards one point. They always say, do not go to the iceberg, but then eventually you end up at the iceberg. And that's the same with the future. But the problem over there is that you actually put yourself in a really vulnerable space if you look at it from this point, where you can have the concept of path dependency. So if you only look at one point within the future, then all unforeseen circumstances can have a really big impact on you. And actually, we want students to be prepared for these uncertainties, these contingencies that come ahead of them. So what we as futurists or future thinkers say is that you have to think from the present in multiple futures. You have to look at it from different perspectives, and in order to then make more informed decisions based upon these different perspectives that you can have of the future. And that is actually the idea behind futures thinking. It's actually quite logical. It's actually quite simple. But it's still something that a lot of students and even grown-up people, even people who are a lot older, don't really comprehend for the fullest. And that actually is where futures literacy comes in. So if we look at futures literacy, then we see that, of course, you have some more classical ways of literacy. We have basic literacy where people can write and read. We have digital literacy, people knowing what the impact is of their, for example, multimedia usage. We have media literacy, financial literacy, and actually futures literacy can also be put in this line. And to put a concrete definition now on futures literacy is actually the capability to use and imagine these multiple futures that I was talking about for different purposes and in different contexts. And so you want to think in futures and to make informed decisions today to put yourself in a more future resilient perspective. And you can apply it on different levels. For example, a student can use it on the individual level. Think about what kind of futures are ahead of me, what kind of choices can I make in my further education. We can think about it from an organizational perspective. For example, certain organizations can say, okay, we want to discover a certain market, but what is the best market? What kind of product do we actually need to develop? But we can also think about the future or apply futures literacy on a societal level. So we can think about what do we want as a society in the future. A recommendation that I have over here is the Futures Playbook, the Futures Literacy Playbook from UNESCO. This is actually a website that I also put here in the presentation, where there is a full-fledged explanation upon what futures literacy is, how you can train it. For example, within Futures Literacy Laboratories, which is also very interesting to perform with students. And it's also explained the more fundamental part behind it. You can have a step-by-step guide over there. So we have at the one side futures literacy, and this is the capability. So the more mindset approach, but at the other side, we also have foresight. Maybe you have heard of it in the past before. But to explain what foresight especially is that we can look at this this graph. And this graph actually says that if you look at the top of the graph, that you can see futures literacy, which is the capability approach that I just explained. But of course, in order to do that, you might need some methodologies for it. You might need some methods, like I explained in the design thinking. You can also apply different methods in order to think in these different futures. For example, you have the futures coin, you have the metaphors of black swans, we have mega trends, we have scenario planning. So there are a lot of different methodologies that you can apply. To give some examples of these futures methodologies, these are actually based upon the futures cone. And like I said, we need to think in different futures, and the futures cone shows that, first of all, we can think upon the future. If you look at today, that we can look in different perspectives or from different points towards this future. So we can think about the projected future. This was the one that I was explaining. If we look at statistical models, if we look at economical models, where the future just develops in one line. But then we can also think about probable futures, what is likely to happen. Well, we can also think about plausible futures, what could happen, where we actually start to use our imagination. And you can also think about future I can also think about possible futures, where you really try to imagine unforeseen circumstances. You really try to think about futures that are really not expected today, the unknown unknowns, as they like to call them. And in order to do this, you have different techniques, different methods. For example, trend gathering and uncertainty analysis. So we look at trends. We actually ask students to think about, what do you see happening today? What kind of things do you see happening? Are some things going up, going down? For example, the rising number of AI applications in education, you see more of them. So we might say that within the future, we will use more AI applications. But at the same time, we also see that a lot of students don't fully yet comprehend AI. So that's maybe an uncertainty, which can give us another future image. So we can actually look differently at the future. And then you also have here the 2x2 method, which is actually a method from scenario planning, where you further structurize the trends, the uncertainties of today, into a concrete framework that can make you think on a more broad way upon this future. An example that I have here is actually future scenarios for Flanders in 2040 that I have written a few weeks ago with some stakeholders. So we actually were collaborating with experts. We were then collaborating with these experts to create future scenarios. And then we thought about, okay, what kind of threats and opportunities are present within these scenarios, and how can we apply them within the choices in technology development that we do today in order to solve certain problems that we see today. And here we actually have Flanders, so we have the same world, we have the same time frame of 2040, but we have 4 different scenarios. We try to look at them in 4 different ways. Because of a lack of time, I won't go too deep into them. So now, of course, you guys know what design thinking is, more or less. You guys know what futures thinking is. There are 2 mindsets, which contain a lot of methods, a lot of mindsets, a lot of ideas, concepts. But how do we actually combine them? Because this is where it really gets interesting. And if we look at the process of design thinking, if we look at the different phases, then we can actually apply futures thinking in every phase. For example, in the empathize phase, we can look at future needs of people, or we can look at how might these needs of the people actually develop within the near future or even the further future. Within the divine phase, we can look at challenges that are present today, or we can look at future challenges. When ideating, when looking for solutions, we can actually think about future solutions that are more future robust or future resilient. For prototyping, we can look at emerging technologies in order to prototype new solutions. And for the testing, we can also use the different scenarios or the futures thinking in order to make the right decision and to learn as much as possible. So this is the way how to actually combine them, and this is also what will try to do in a few weeks. So what now? Because like I said, it's a lot of theory, it's a lot of abstract things. I hope you guys understood a little bit of it, but actually that's not a big problem. Because in a few minutes, you guys are going to do some kind of futures literacy exercise that Al's actually prepared, in which she is actually applying AI in order to think about the future in a more diverse way. And also on the 14th of March, we're going to organize a hackathon with students here in Flanders, also in order to have concrete methodologies and in order to have concrete steps to apply them, to also make them realize, to think in futures, to think with the end user, and apply these abstract insights within a concrete methodology. So I think I'm going to stop here, Els, and that you will take over again. I hope I wasn't too much over my time, because I can't talk about this for a few months, I think. So yeah, I think it's your turn. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, so indeed, there's a lot of information on this framework, but it's interesting to first dive deep in the framework. And now I try to translate this into an exercise that you can do in a classroom. Basically, the main message is there is not one future. You can imagine multiple futures. And we have now something called AI to do so for us. So we can use that a little bit. What I did in my classroom before is like a simple exercise to spark imagination and spark creativity. You can give students just a paper and a pencil, and they have to challenge each other. One is a challenger, the other one needs to overcome those challenges. There's even an online game on it. It's called Draw a Stickman. So you draw something like a river, someone else draws an X and puts down a tree so you can get over the river. The other one has another challenge. There's like rocks in between, and then you can create a dynamite and stuff like that. So that's already an exercise that I feel like in the classroom, it works to spark creativity. Now you can actually, like I said, it's all in the context. And what Ben was telling about thinking about the future, you can think about like mega trends, things that are already going on now and that you think that will keep on going in the future, or things that you're very unsure about. So you can actually ask the students, and I want to ask you the same question, like, what are your biggest fears for the futures? What would you ask a fortune teller? What is maybe your biggest hope for the future? I did that actually based on my fears. I already did the exercise myself. And for example, I took Copilot, and there's a prompt that I did here. It's like a world where there is no soil left for crops to grow, and all food is created synthetically or in vertical farms. When I prompted it, Copilot asked me, like, should I make it this topic? And I said, okay, let's try to do that. And this is the image that it got to me. You can start from here, and to me, it's already like sparking some imagination, but it's not specific enough. So that's good. So it's not too specific. So there's not really anything in there that's saying like how these vertical farms are created or things like that. So to me, it's really nice context. Now you can ask students, like, what would you do to make this a reality, or either make this not a reality? I asked Copilot to do the same thing, and the prompt that I got, that I made, is actually, instead of using the word this topic, I changed it to you topic. And it's very interesting to see these images already, because basically there's no difference in this world. The only thing that you could do is like let the sun shine a little bit more and have some more concrete on the floor. But basically the systems are the same. It's just a different feeling. And here, based on this exercise, you can actually already start your creativity. Like, what would you do to make this a reality, or make this not a reality? I wonder if there's someone in the chat who wants to do a prompt at this moment. I don't know. Ben, maybe you can see if there's in the chat any prompt, but I will give you extra examples from what I did. Like maybe a world where people cannot make the difference between real and fake news. Again, I did it just this topic and utopic. Again, no very specific things, so it can already spark some creativity and imagination. Another one, where a world where oil is scarce and we still heavily rely on it for transportation and manufacturing. Again, the two, you see here the two differences in this world, which can already help, for example, in the ideation phase when you're starting the design thinking. Another interesting topic, so I want to point that out. If you're using things like AI, please make sure you're a bit aware of it before you go into the classroom. I did a prompt, a dystopic world where only rich people can afford healthcare, and healthcare has taken the form of making superhumans. This content wasn't generated. There's something in the AI system that people can still overrule with certain ethics. So in all these AI systems, there's like ethical things that need to be addressed. There's bias, there's the energy consumption and all of that. So please make sure that you're aware of that before you go into the classroom with these AI tools. It's not really funny, but the only thing that I need to change on this prompt is actually just where only rich people can afford healthcare. That was like excluded, and if I erase that, it could create me the images that I was looking for. So this is like a small exercise that can help you start sparking the imagination, and most of all, making sure that students realize there's multiple futures possible, actually depending on their part of it. So they can really do something about that future. I did this exercise already with a small group of students, like very quickly, and with the same thing, like the stick man. So one group, they can imagine a world, and the other group needed to try to figure out solutions for it. For example, someone said, so it's again based on fears or whatever they're closely related to, and one student said, that there's a world where it's like with the climate change that it's too warm to go outside. And the funny thing is, the reaction on that was, let's reprogram our human cells. I would already immediately think we'll just create some astronaut package, but they already wanted to reprogram the cells so that they didn't feel the warmth, and then even reprogram them so that they didn't degenerate. So I think that's the thing that we're trying to look for. If you start a hackathon, like spark the imagination, and like based on these concepts, we can create something that is really usable in the classroom. We're still figuring out how to do it. We're part in the design thinking process, we will probably fail and we go back, but we're in that process. So feel free to join us and follow us on our channels from Brightlab to see how we create something on that. I'm going to see, is there anyone who prompted something in the chat? I don't see it here. Yeah?
No, not yet.
No. Okay. Feel free to try it out for yourself at home. What we also want to give you is some resources. So Ben explained on the design thinking tool, there's actually a very interesting Miro board created by Ben. So if you use Miro, M-E-R-O, you can look for the templates. It's the user innovation tool. There's also a website based on it, and Anna will share it now in the chat, where you can really have hands-on questions. And like if you look at the board, you will see how you can go in that double diamond phase in your hackathon yourself. And then now it's Q&A time. If there was already a question in the chat for Ben, actually.
Can I answer it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. No, so I will just, so the question was, can you give us a little information on the process of the program and implementation? Do you implement the process over a few weeks or months, or do you plan it like hackathons? Actually, that's why I also presented it as a method. I'm more on the abstract level, because you can apply it in different formats. So we have actually formats of 1 day, we have formats of 2 days, but a few years ago we also applied the design thinking methods in a project in Indonesia where we had a 2-week format, and you can also apply it in a few months. So it's really about the mindset to apply it within certain ways. In the example that I gave from Common, this was 1 week. So in 1 week, we actually had every day we had one step of the design thinking process. So at the first day, we actually gave them the assignment to empathize with their end users. This was organized within the library. They were able to actually talk to people with within the library. We also went with them on a little student trip. We went to certain places, healthcare places within Ghent, and so on. We did this in 1 week. So there is actually multiple manners to apply it. But actually, the user innovation tool that Els just shared, this is applied for 1 day, so a 1-day format. But like I said, you can also divide it over different lessons. If you only have 2 hours in the week with students, then you can maybe have one lesson on empathizing, really trying to tell them like, okay, you need to empathize, and you have one lesson to define a problem, and so on and so on. So it's like really about creativity and applying it within different contexts.
Great. Thank you, Ben and Els, for your presentation and the answer to this question. If there is any other question that anyone want to ask, feel free to do it through the chat, but also you can unmute yourself and speak directly to our expert here of this great methodology that were shared with us today for this webinar. But actually, I have a question. If no one wants to join the Q&A, I would like to know what kind of advice would you give to educators at this point who are new with this methodology but want to get started?
Do I answer or you else?
Yeah, maybe I will answer because I was a teacher before. Yeah, first of all, don't be afraid to try because failing is part of the process. So that's really keep that in mind. I think that's the biggest hurdle for everyone. And then definitely the toolbox, like the Miro boards, is really interesting because it already gives you questions like in the design thinking process. And then you can already use the exercise that I gave as the futures thinking so that the user innovation toolbox is really, if you read through it, and you can let your students just read through it and answer the questions, and you have the design thinking process. And if you just want to, use the future thinking method, the exercise that I showed could be interesting to try out, and you can maybe figure out yourself some extra other exercises. We're in the process of thinking about more of those exercises. We will keep you informed on the Brightlab website, but at this moment we're still working on it. Yeah.
Maybe in addition to that, I think my advice would be like, learn to fail. So really apply it. Try to apply it. I know there was a lot of theoretic foundations over here, but eventually along the way, if you actually put it into practice, you will also learn the idea behind it. You will realize after a session, you will see students have different interactions with each other. These interactions might give you new ideas. These interactions might also inspire you to understand the methodology a little bit further. So just do it. I would say, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for the answer. And thank you, both of you, Els and Ben, for sharing these 2 great methodologies with us, and also how to bring them into the classroom. So for the Miro tool, the link is shared in the chat, as is also shared the link to Brightlab website for all the updated about your great work. And thank you very much for what you do for our future and the way we are going to think about it. So I think that this brings us to the end, also because we are definitely running out of time. So today's session comes to the end. Again, a huge thank you to our speakers, Els and Ben, for your time. Thank you very much, and also for your expertise. And of course, thank you all of you for joining and engaging in these great discussions today. We hope that you find it insightful. I think so. And I invite you to stay connected with Code Week for more upcoming webinars. And for this next webinar is gonna take place next Monday, the 24th of February from 4 to 5 p.m. chat. And the title is this one. So from idea to business opportunity, empowering the next generation and supporting innovation in education with artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is a topic that it's everyone wants to know about. So stay tuned. If you want to, you can register. The link is already available in the chat. But also stay tuned on Code Week social network channel to know more details about the next session, and also, of course, register for it. So thank you once again, everyone, and we look forward to see you at the future events. Have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Bye.